Okay, now that we have our virtual camera created, we're going to start setting up our shot transitions. Now, the one thing that I did leave out, this is actually super important. Whenever you create a virtual camera, there's something called priority over here. So if you click the virtual camera right here, priority. What this means is that when the brain doesn't know which camera should be active, like let's say we haven't really defined it down here and there's just multiple virtual cameras active, it's going to default to the virtual camera with the highest priority. Now, because we want the player's camera to always be the default, unless we're specifically controlling it, we don't want this to have more priority than the camera. And you'll see that the player camera up here has 10 priority. So because they both have 10 priority, it's kind of a toss-up which one it'll choose. So what I want to do is just double check. Anytime you're making a cutscene virtual camera, I'm just going to bump that priority on the virtual camera down to 0, just to make sure that we are never returning to this camera unless we explicitly say so. Okay, now that we've done that, you can see the game preview is imagining that this is the active camera. So what we want to do is we want to actually set up our shot transitions. Now, I mentioned I want to start off with this camera. I don't want to add a second camera, but you could if you want, and then we would want to switch to whatever else. And then lastly, switch back to the player. Now, in order to do that, I need to start animating inside of my timeline window. So if you don't have this open already, go ahead and open it. It's window, sequencing, timeline, put it where you want. I like it down here. And the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to lock this, because you're going to click a lot of different things and you'll have to click back on intro to get it back. But in order to see anything in this window at all, you need to actually click on the object that has the playable director component on it, because this is linking back to our timeline asset. And then all this data inside this window is inside of our timeline asset. So make sure that you click the object with the playable director, and this is going to be our main cutscene object. And once you have this selected, go down to your little lock button and lock it. Lock your timeline window. This way we can click other things and we can still animate pretty easily. Okay, now in order to do this, in order to set this up, we can add different kinds of tracks, but what we want is a Cinemachine shot track. So if we click add and we go to Cinemachine track, I believe is what we want. So if I click this, you're going to see a new track pop up here, and it's going to be looking for a brain. Now we need to specify the brain we want to use. If there were multiple brains in the scene, like maybe you had multiplayer or some other various kinds of player object control, you want to specify which one. For now, I think we only have one inside of our scene. You'd actually click this little drop down and it should show you what objects in your scene have a brain. But just to be really explicit with this, since I know that this is my brain, I'm just going to drag this in to the slot right there. Okay, and now once you have this filled in, the brain is active, and we can tell the brain which shots we want to switch to, or which virtual cameras we want to switch to at any point in time. So you should be able to drag this around. On this track, this is our timeline, so it's going to be, this is frames right here. If you want to change this to seconds, you could. I believe this little thing right here, this little gear, you can change from frames to seconds if you want. I'm just going to stick with frames, just keep it default. And when we first start off, I wanted to start off with this other, what do we call this? Cam Shot 01. We'll call this cam, let me just relabel this real quick. Cam _ intro _ shot 1. Okay. Now, I'm going to add cinema shot is what I want. So all I did is I right clicked over here in the space next to the track and clicked add cinema shot. It'll bring up this little bar. Now, when you click this bar over here in your inspector over to the right, you're going to see a Cinemachine shot, and it's looking for a virtual camera. I want to specify this little one right here, so I'm going to drag that in. Okay, cool. And I'm not going to mess with all those other settings right now. But this is 300 frames. I think it's assuming 60 frames a second. So if we were to do 60 frames, this would be 1 second, 120, I believe is 2 seconds. Let's make this whole thing, I don't know, 5 seconds is pretty good. Right around 5 seconds. Okay, if you want more specific, you want a more exact, precise, you can zoom in as much as you want and you can go frame by frame. I'm gonna put this at 300. It really doesn't matter. Your cutscene might be different, so however long you want it. And you could preview this by hitting space. See how our camera's not moving? Once we get to the end, it's gonna be within the shot. Now, what I think would be really cool is if at the very end, maybe we blended into the player camera. So I'm gonna see what that looks like. Let's say a 1 second blend, but we want it to be pretty fast. So, actually no, I'm gonna undo that. Keep this at 300. I'm gonna add another cinema shot though, Cinemachine shot. So again, right click over here, add Cinemachine shot. And if I were to drag this into the previous one, this is going to blend the cameras together, meaning that we're going to transition between one camera to the next, and that's going to be a position. So it'll kind of, it's hard to explain. It will move between one camera and the next, and so we'll gradually shift between one or the other. Now, this second one that I just made, I'm going to specify as the player camera. And I know that that's a CMVCam1. I'm not going to rename this because I don't know if the 2DGameKit is needing this name for anything specific, and because I'm not sure, I'm just going to leave it. But I am going to specify that this is the shot. So click down on your shot inside of timeline, and then drag it in. So right here, drag in right there. Okay, so this is our player camera. And you'll see that if we hit spacebar, the preview, it'll just jump between the two. I think it'd be cool to just get a really quick transition into the player cam. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it in. So if I were to do this, see how it's blending between the two? And actually, I want the level to start pretty much as soon as this finishes. So I'm going to drag this all the way so that as soon as this line is done transitioning, we're starting, right? And the end of the cutscene right there. Maybe I want this to be faster or slower. I can blend that. We'll do some stuff right here. Then we'll shift over to our player. Now, if this is a really long way away, this would be a really fast, a really long, quick shift, but you can tweak this however you want. And with that, we're going to look at the camera animations next, but we should be able to get our camera shot set up. So you should be able to preview this, hit spacebar, and see what your shot is going to look like.